this year I've had these little moments of glimpses where I feel really at peace, and I can kind of have this awareness of, I guess, Brent was saying is like this emptiness, and
Hmm.
but then it's like the moment I have that awareness of that awareness, it kind of like falls apart. Like, is it just a matter of continuing to practice and meditate until that becomes more pronounced? It's just like because I've had it was like I went to a show recently, a concert, and it wasn't a particular wonderful piece of music or anything, and it wasn't anything I was in love with or anything. It wasn't emotional, but then I just felt like I was pulled into it, and I
Hmm.
almost felt like looking at it in almost in just a different vein. And then the moment I noticed that, it just felt like it all kind of fell apart, and I was like, it's almost like trying to grab a bubble in the air or something like that. And the moment that I had that thought, it just
Yeah.
poof and kind of all fell away. So
Yeah.
I
So
don't know.
you're
Can you speak to that?
yes, yes. So your question, is it just a matter of continuing to practice? The answer is yes. It's really that simple. You may have heard before the traditional metaphor that comes is popular in the Vedic tradition that I use a lot. That when we meditate, it's like the traditional method of dyeing cloth, where in India, the weavers are usually Muslims for this centuries of tradition, and so you take the white cloth and you dip it into the vat of red dye, and it comes out. It looks like it's really bright red, but then what you do is you stretch it out on a flat rock in the sun, and the sun fades out a bunch of the color, but what remains there is now stabilized. So what do? Now you take this slightly pink cloth and you dip it in the red dye again and put it out in the sun, fade it again. Now a little bit more of the color. Right. So you keep dipping, fading, and eventually it becomes stabilized, permanent, bright red. So this is what we're doing. The cloth is our mind, is our nervous system. We're dipping it into the vat of boundlessness, emptiness, beingness, kingdom of heaven, whatever you want to call it, whatever misleading term we want to use, because all the terms are misleading. Because the actual thing, as you know, as you've experienced, is much simpler than any name that we can put on it. And then we come out of meditation, and that's putting the cloth in the sun, and then it starts to fade. And when that happens, it's not surprising that people can feel disappointed. Like you come out, oh, I'm just come out of this meditation, and sometimes we come out, oh, I feel so peaceful and or blissful or whatever, and then oh, got to go back to work, and now the phones are ringing or whatever, the dogs are barking, the kids are demanding lunch, the whatever's going on. I feel like I lost my zen. I lost my my some all this stuff killed my buzz. Well, that's supposed to happen. That has to happen. That is part of the process. You can't just dip the cloth. You have to fade it. That's the stabilizing part. And it's really, really helpful, I think, to understand this, to know that that's not a mistake. That none of it go. You've meditated once. Your cloth is never going to be pure white again. Too late for that, right? Um, and it's in fact, my old teacher Maharishi, who he used to use this analogy over and over and over again. He always said yellow dye, by the way. And it took me years, it took me decades to be able to use any color other than yellow because I'd heard Maharishi say yellow so many times. And uh, and once he explained it, he said the path to awakening is not meditation. The path to awakening is the alternation of meditation and activity. You can just sit in a cave meditating, like just soaking the cloth and the dye. And if you don't come out and stabilize it, at some point you got to step out of the cave, and then you'll lose it. And in fact, he said, but it's because mostly people are engaged in an activity that I've taught you to teach meditation. If people were sitting in caves meditating, I would train you to teach them to engage in activity. It's just whatever is the 50% of the practice that they're not doing. Yeah, Kristen, you wanted to jump in here?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up again.
Mm-hmm.
So, what about monks? Like, where do monks fall in
Mm-hmm.
with the dye?
Yeah, it's yeah. The model still works. See, the reality of monastic life. Um, Clearly, I don't have a lot of firsthand expertise on this. Um, Back in my hippie days, I used to think, well, like so many people, I had misread the scriptures. I had misread the text, and I thought, oh man, this is a tough choice. I either get to have, enjoy the outer life, and or I got to be a monk. Um, and I knew I was not cut out for that. I knew I was not wired for that. So it was a wonderful discovery to find. Uh, Really, it was my teacher Maharishi. His it was reading his. He wrote a translation and commentary on the first 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, where he takes it verse by verse, line by line, and unpacks it and shows this is where people have misunderstood, where people have read basically descriptions of this beingness, this awareness, this rigpa, whatever, which is not touched, so to speak, by the changing outer world, and have misread it to mean, oh, you have to go into a monastery or go into a cave where you're not touched by the outside world. But that's just a gross, clumsy reading of it. The real thing is much more profound than that. It's about consciousness. It's not something as superficial as lifestyle. Now, having said that, some people are cut out for the monastery. Some people are, but in the monastery, you still die, you still fade the cloth. People in my, so we tend to have these very kind of, cartoonish fantasies of what the monastic life is. But in the monastery, people work. They got, someone's got to grow the potatoes, someone's got to peel the potatoes, someone's got to cook the potatoes, serve the potatoes. Guess who does that? It's the monks, the nuns, whoever's there in the monastery or the convent. There's a lot of work to be done to have um, a self-sustaining community.
So, would you say it's like all in relativity? So, like our, you know, normal people lives are
Yeah.
dipping the cloth in our world, and then like the monks are dipping the cloth in their version of their world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's in the traditional language. It's the monastic path or the householder path, and and again, Maharishi just was very clear about that. Was very helpful to me. They said they're both equally valid paths, but what's important is to not mix them up, not to be confused about them, and to not try to do something that you're not cut out for. And very few people are cut out for the monastic life. And this is the great line in the Bhagavad Gita that says, the dharma of another brings danger. Better is death in your own dharma than life in the danger than life in the dharma of another. Um, if you're trying to be, and people who, again, very few people are cut out for that monastic life. Those who are will probably find their way to it. Um, those who aren't may try it for a while, and it won't work out for them. And it might be a very uh, might be a good growth experience to do that for a while. Spend some time in the monastery. And by the way, it's not always a lifetime commitment. It's not always, oh, you betrayed your vows. It's in certainly in Tibet, in a lot of traditions, it's understood you might be in the monastery for a while, maybe for some years, and then it's time for you to leave. David, do you want to jump in here?
Actually, two thoughts. One off of Jeremy and one off Kristen. During COVID lockdown, I became aware that I was a monk in my own monastery, and that's when I entered a lot of deep meditation or practicing meditation regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And think about how many things we do solo. You practice your music, we paint, we design, you write. Those are solo activities. And so there's sort of, there's the monkdom, if you will, and then we take it into life. And the other thing off of Jeremy's comment, about 2-3 weeks ago, I was reading early in the morning, and you know how sometimes you read and you drift off into thought? Well, I drifted off into awareness, but I wasn't aware of it. And then it was like, oh, and it was cool. Like I didn't go, oh, I got to do that again. It was like, oh, wait a minute. This is like the fruit of what's going on here. So,
Yeah.
so I just want to.
You know, when I was a kid, I did a little bit of horseback riding, and the one of the first things you learned is if you allow your horse to get its head turned toward the corral and it's feeding time, you're going to the corral. You're not going anywhere else, right? It's just that pull, and that is the pull, like the pull on our mind toward the pull on our emotions and our physical nervous system. Everything is being pulled toward shunyata, toward rigpa, toward the kingdom of heaven. This is what they're like. We're like heat-seeking missiles. We are enlightenment-seeking organisms, and that's why natural meditation works. When we just get out of the way, exactly what Seymour said earlier. We get out of the way. We don't do it. We let it do us, and it happens by itself. And that's why effort in meditation is counterproductive. This is why working doesn't work. Not working works, unlike everything else in life. So it's natural that when our mind has learned the way, the horse has learned the way back to the corral. Anytime it gets a chance, it's going to, we don't have to sit down on the cushion and cross our legs and close our eyes and call it meditation. Anytime it gets a chance, it's going to tend to go back there. And then the cool thing is that it's going to go back there when we're walking around in the world of forms. The more and more the mind is going to go back to emptiness, including finding it in all those forms. That's the real monkdom. That's the real, that you can be watching a movie and finding the emptiness in the form of the movie. Looking at, there's this beautiful, I've got this theory about love songs, all those silly Tin Pan Alley love songs with the ridiculous hyperbole about how, right, which is that they all make perfect sense. They're all literally true if we understand that all the love songs are addressed to God. They're all addressed to the infinite, right? And by the way, when no one else is around except maybe my wife, I sing those. I play my baritone ukulele over here, and I sing those songs. Check out, The Very Thought of You, right? Is a great standard, sung by everyone. Billie Holiday, Frank Sinatra. My favorite version is Nat King Cole. You can find him on YouTube. Nat King Cole singing The Very Thought of You. And just realize that it's addressed to God, right? And how that's the monastic life. The very thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary things that everyone ought to do. Right? We're pulled away from the smallness into just the moment we have the thought, the impulse. Doesn't even have to be a thought. The last verse, everything's great, but I'll cut to the last verse, which is the best. I see your face in every flower, your eyes in stars above. Right? There it is. There it is. We see the face of God, the face of the infinite, everywhere we look, every flower, every star, every pile of dog shit on the sidewalk. Right? So yeah, that's the real monastery. Thank you for that, David. Amen to that.